Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. I'm your host, Marcia Andrews, dairy science professor and extension specialist at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul. With us today is also your co-host, Jim Sulphur, dairy extension educator at the St. Cloud Regional Office. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Marcia. Hi, everyone.
So before we get started and bring our guest this morning or this afternoon, whatever you are, I'd like to remind you that if you are watching this episode as a recording on YouTube and would like to join us for the live virtual discussion next time, please register at z.umn.edu/30, the number 30, MINRM. Once you register, you only have to do it once, and then you will receive your monthly reminders for the webinars that will follow. For today's discussion, as usual, we're going to use the Q&A box. You can find that on the bottom of your screen. Type your question or comment, and either Jim or I will read your question or comment on your behalf for our dairy producer to respond to you. And since many of you here in this webinar most likely are interested in technology, also I would like to invite you to join us in 2023 in June for the Precision Dairy Conference in Bloomington, Minnesota at the Hyatt Regency, about a 5-minute ride from the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. We'll have many dairy producer panels where you can learn from the end users what technology has done to improve their bottom line. Today, we're very happy to have with us Doyle from Pennsylvania. Their farm milks a portion of their cows with 20 DeLaval robots, and they're pioneers, one of the probably the first, or at least I recall, maybe the first large dairy to install robots, or one of the first ones. And so lots of experience to share today. So I invite you, Doyle, to join us and participate on this, and I'll be moving the slides for you. So thank you for being here and taking time from your busy schedule. And I'll go away for a while, and then you can tell us a bit, about 10 minutes or so, about your operation, and then we'll open up for questions and comments. Thank you, Doyle.
You're welcome, and it's a pleasure to be with you and with your audience. This first slide is an aerial view of our farm operation. We are a large family-owned business. Currently, there is myself and a brother and then one of my sons involved in the management of the farm. Our original farm was purchased from the Penn family back in 1784. So I'm known as the Generation 8, or as we call our G8, and my son is G9. Our farm lies in both Maryland and Pennsylvania, and our current herd size is 1,500 adult cows, currently milking 1,400. And we raise all of our herd replacements, and that number is 975. We have a closed herd and have been since 1979, and been lots of internal herd growth ever since. The barn at the top of this picture of complex of buildings is our robotic barn. It's a sawtooth roof. That's why it looks a little different. And I'll talk about that here in just a moment. Slightly to the right and below that barn is our silo setup. It's unusual in that it is covered by roof. We did that back in the 90s at the suggestion of Dr. Keith Bolson, who's now deceased. But he was with Kansas State University, and for many years he kept encouraging me to cover that silo area with a roof. And upon a visit by him, he was very surprised to see that I took that suggestion to heart. Then in the middle of the picture is several barns that are our conventional barns with conventional milking parlor. And then to the right, lower right of that, you'll see 5 different calf barns that we use to raise our calves from birth up to 1 year of age. Then amongst all of those buildings is a conventional, right in the center of the picture actually, is our conventional milking parlor. We milk about 300 head with that. It's originally a double 24 parallel, and it has been downsized since to a double 16. To the left of the picture, you will, where the Marcia's mouse is, you'll see 3 lagoons that are lined and covered that we use for storing all of our manure. Portions of that will be sent out through center pivot irrigation, but in recent years, we've begun hauling all of that out to get better distribution of the phosphorus content across our fields. You may go to the second slide, Marcia. This is a picture of the inside of our robotic barn. And let me put a disclaimer here up front. This is all the ways not to build a robotic barn these days, probably. Now, there's some good ideas in it, but this is 20-year-old technology. And this industry has traveled fast with robotic milking. We had originally partnered with DeLaval back in 2004 and 2009 with trying to take the DeLaval VMS box and adapt it to a large herd. This barn currently is milking 1,071 cows as of this morning, and we have a 2.86 milkings per day. You'll notice the sawtooth roof structure by the ceiling. That is a false ceiling underneath the trusses. We like that because it gives us a lot of natural ventilation from about October through into May. And then in the summertime, we tunnel ventilate it. And at the far end of the barn is 51 large fans. The other advantage of a sawtooth roof is it gives us a lot of natural light. We had built this in phases, as we call it, or you think of it as stages. Phase 1 was built in 2005. That was half the barn. And then in 2002, we built the other half. We took out the original robotic stations and we put in 20 new ones in 2009. Currently, these are 13 years going into the 14th year of use, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. There are 20 pens. Each pen has its own milking station, and this barn is for all saleable milk. So if there's any sick cows, they will go back to the conventional barns and to the parlor there to handle them for whatever treatments may be necessary. So we handle this as one large herd, and because of our herd size, we're fortunate that we can make some choices and how we handle the cattle, house them, and particularly how we do the milking. You may go to the next slide. Here you will see in the lower front of the picture 2 sort pens that are associated with 2 milking stations that you'll see in the middle of the picture. You can notice the blue ribbon that has the DeLaval logo on it. That is half of a room which has on the opposite side of it that you can't see 2 more milking stations for a total of 4 in the room. And that is situated at the corners of 4 pens. So we have 4 pens that are joined together by one room that houses the milking stations. Then down through the center of the barn, there's 6 other rooms like this that house the milking stations to get the whole barn milked. You may go to the next slide. This is standing on top of one of those rooms and looking down upon a particular pen. You'll notice several things here. We use manure solids, recycled manure solids for bedding on top of a mattress. These are 4 rows of free stalls in this pen. And then the top of the picture, you'll see the back end of the cows as they're eating at a feed bunk. We have here in the lower right-hand corner, a smart gate that is right at the milking station for the holding pen where I'm standing on top of to take a picture. In this barn, we have 2 full-time herdsmen who work at taking care of the cows. And then we have 2 full-time technicians and a part-time technician that take care of all of the repair and maintenance work on the robotics. So all of my repair work and work on the robotic stations is done in-house. These are people that I've trained to do that work. We can go to the 4th slide now, and I believe this is the last one I have. Nope, maybe that's all there is.
That was the slides we had, I think, Doyle, but this was very, very good review, I think. So very professionally done. I'm sure people have some questions, but this is excellent. Thank you. We have one question already. What is the ratio of free stalls to the station, the milking stations?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yep. There are about 50 free stalls in each pen, so there's just a few less than what we populate the pen with. We normally put 55 cows per pen, and that's a fairly low number in today's industry. But you need to keep in mind these are older machines. In the 14th year, there's a fairly high maintenance and repair with them, so we're well into a lot of wear and tear. And we need the idle time to be able to perform that. So typically I'm looking for about 11 to 15% idle time in each of the stations.
Makes sense. I think I made a mistake. I think the person was actually curious about how many feed bunk spaces, I guess, you have, or headlocks, or yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's a different question. And
right, sorry.
we have enough room for 25 cows.
25, okay.
That works out fairly well. Even when we go in with a fresh batch of feed to put down at the bunk, there will be cows trying to go there. Even though we have a milk first operation, cows will get up and go through the smart gates trying to get out to there if they do not have milking permission.
Okay. Jim, you want to take the next one maybe?
Sure. Do you want to comment just on milking frequency? I know you did mention that earlier, but some of the other metrics that people might be wondering about, and maybe it's always a curiosity how that compares to your parlor, and it's maybe hard because you don't have many cows in your parlor, but just some of those metrics.
Yes. Our milk production, people often ask, is about the same. Currently, our robotic barn is doing 92 pounds per cow with about a 4.1 test on butterfat. Herd-wide, we currently are at 90 pounds of milk, so the parlor is going to be a little bit lower, but we have good components there too and good milk quality. The 2.86 that I saw on our computer screen this morning is pretty typical. I don't like to see it go below 2.7. We have in this barn a fairly cyclic pattern of calving for heavy in the fall and light in the spring. So we'll come into this coming summer with only about 975 cows in the barn. We'll go up to 3.0 milkings per cow. And we'll hold that through for about 6 months until we get into our heavy calving at the end of the year. I typically say that 2.8, 2.9 milkings per cow will get us the same amount of milk production as a 3.0 in a milking parlor.
Okay, makes sense. Question about feeding here. How has your feeding program changed with AMS in 20 years? I mean, reference forages grown, robot feed provided. What have you been through? Sure, a lot of different changes. Yeah.
Yeah. My nutritionist I have started with us in 2002, and he's been with me the whole time we've had this robotic barn. The pellet that we use for in the milking station has only ever had its formula changed about 4 different times since then. We really were fortunate when we started out. We had a good sound pellet in terms of the ingredients and the palatability to the cows, and we haven't changed it at all too often. I will mention I've tried feeding a meal, and that worked out surprisingly well. I went to a lower feed rate. Currently, we're feeding about 8 pounds per cow on average with a range of 2 to 14. And we went to a meal at one point in time because of our forages that we had, and it was a high protein, and that worked well for us. But, and then in terms of the PMR that we have out at the bunk, it is balanced for 80 pounds of milk. And that's a combination of corn silage, alfalfa, high moisture ear corn that we have on farm, and then the other grains and additives.
Okay, thank you. Jim, maybe you can get the next one.
Can you comment a little bit about days in milk, what you're averaging? It probably swings a little bit, but kind of on an average, what do you do there?
Yes, Jim, we currently have our herd average is at 157 days in milk. That's probably about our low for the year, and then we'll trend up towards about 175.
Okay, so this is a big question now. What would you change if you could build it again, a new facility?
Oh,
oh, that might take a whole day. Let me see how much time we have. No, just kidding.
There's lots of things I would change. The alley width in this barn is too narrow. And with there being so many pens, there's a lot of gates, countless number of gates throughout this barn. That makes it difficult for our bedding crew. That's one thing I hadn't mentioned. Bedding crew comes to this barn. The repro team comes to this barn that we have for the herd, and the feeding crew comes to this barn. So when bedding crew is in there, it's a hurry up, get it done during the 1 hour of wash up that we hold at the 10 o'clock hour. And they are very good at getting it done very quickly. And that gives us the least amount of disruption to the cows because we're doing it during the wash up hour. It takes exactly 1 hour for us to do a wash up.
Okay.
Other things would possibly be definitely would be going to a larger pen size. We attempted to do that with the 100 cows, and we did it wrong. We had a milking station, one at each end of the pen, and what we found very quickly is the cows will favor one of the milking stations over the other because the lead cows would just go to the one and then everybody else would follow it. So we eventually ended up separating the pens, which was easy for us to do at the time, so that we had just one milking station per pen. That definitely would be a thing that we're going to have to change going to into the future. And we're contemplating a new milking facility eventually here soon anyways, because my VMSs are well into wear and tear stage. We'll need to get to a much larger pen size to accomplish some of the efficiencies that we want.
Okay, Jim, next question.
Foot bath, that's always a question. Where is it?
Yeah.
How often do you do it? Just kind of your foot bath policy.
Actually, we're not doing hardly any foot bathing in this barn. The alleyways seem to be clean enough and dry enough. We run a cable alley scraper 24 hours a day, nonstop. We're able to keep the alleys clean. In our L1 pens, we have 5 of those out of the 20 are for L1s only. We will do some foot bathing from time to time. Typically, it seems to be in the fall months. We do have hairy heelwort in our herd, and that will come alive, we find from time to time. We'll do some foot bathing with temporary plastic foot baths on the exit from the milking station.
Okay. Do your workers get a class on how to run the robots?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do your workers do you teach them? Do they take a class on how to run the robots?
Okay, I understand. Must be the Midwestern accent.
Sure. I read it too fast. I'm sorry.
We don't hold a class per se. For my herdsmen, we put them with an experienced herdsman in the barn, and we do a lot of OJT, on the job training. Typically, I find that I can train up a herdsman to go solo in 2 weeks' time if they are motivated to work in this barn. And as I say that, what I've found is that my younger herds people will adapt very readily to the management of this barn, and that older herdsmen, I hate to be biased, but they typically don't adjust to the new type of management that it takes And it's the management of this barn is very different. The cow behavior is very different. And so obviously then it takes a management by the herdsman to accommodate that.
Jim?
There's a question. What are the reasons for reducing cow numbers in your conventional barns? What happened to those facilities, and what was the logic for milking less cows there and obviously moving to robots?
Yeah, good question. In the year 2019, we downsized our herd from about 2,400 to its current size of 1,500. We had what would be the best way to explain it, about 4 storms that all occurred at the same time, mostly due to manure management. And we made the decision to downsize our herd. I had one brother that wanted to leave also at about the same time, so it was logical for him to take 700-800 head with him to a new location. And all of our older barns are old and worn out. Many of them were built in the 70s and 80s. Actually, the aerial photo that I showed is an old photo. There's 2 large barns that currently are not there and are green grass spots. And so we were at a point where G8, my generation, was aging out, and I'm the oldest actually of them. And so it was a natural decision to try to go to a downsizing. That is difficult to do. We had contemplated that for a number of years, kept saying no, we couldn't do it. We have done it with some success. And I will say that labor issues are the biggest thing that one needs to work out. Unfortunately, we had to let some very experienced employees go.
Yeah, that's always tough, right, Doyle? So there are a couple questions that are somewhat related, so I'm going to read both. What's your training SOP for new arrivals or new animals, excuse me, to the VMS barn? And do you start all cows in the parlor? And if so, how long until you move them to the robot barn? So the whole process of getting them going in the robot.
Yep. We've tried in the past trying to pre-train the L1s before they calve the first time. We've had moderate success with that, and not enough that we've continued to do any of that. So our cows, when they calve, they are at the conventional barns. You get to go through the conventional parlor for 10 days. When the herd health herdsmen say upon their examination on day 9 that they're healthy, milking well, no metabolic disease problems, then they are eligible to go to the robot barn. If they have other confirmation that isn't complementary to the robot, that's when a decision will be made many times. But if she was in the barn the last lactation, most of the time they will go to the robotic barn, and they go into the barn. All we have to do is reteach the robot. Remember, I've got the old classic VMS. We have to do the teaching manually. We'll reteach to the cow's udder conformation at that time, teat position, and they hit the ground running, and they're up to 4x milking in no time at all. With L1s, we go at it a little bit slower, and they will be eligible to go at 10 days, but typically we don't take them until they're 20 days in milk. We find there's a sweet spot around that 20-day point in their lactation that they're accustomed to being milked. Then they are usually have calmed down enough that we can then take them to the robotic barn and we'll start teaching them. Many times we'll have, we'll see about half of them really grab hold in about 2 or 3 milkings. And the other half, it can take up to 5 to 7 days before they are going through on their own without having to be fetched.
And they're by themselves in a lactation 1 pen, or do they get mixed?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. We have 5 L1 pens out of the 20 that have the milking station sized for them. And we like housing our L1s separate from the mature cows.
Sure, thank you. Jim?
Just to confirm, you had mentioned it earlier, but how many stanchions or lockups do you have compared to free stalls in each pen?
In the first half of the barn, we don't have any lockups at the feed bunk, only in the sort pen. And at the time, we were using some BST when the barn was built in '09, and we elected to put lockups in the second half, but we hardly ever use them. Repro team, when they go to do breeding and preg checking, they just go to the cow wherever they are. The behavior is so calm in the herd at that point in that barn. They just walk up to the cow. We do have, and you may not have been able to see it in the slide, we do have feeding loops at the feed bunk, and they are placed at every 31 inches. And they are on an elevated 4-inch platform so that there's no alley scraper passing underneath of them. It's easy for our repro team. It's easy for the herdsmen in the barn to do health checks, whether it be with their udder or checking for all feed conditions. We just go up to the cow and do that task. So we don't really use lockups hardly at all in that barn. If I were to build a new one, I probably wouldn't put any in.
Okay. I think you already kind of touched on this, but how would you structure pen groups as lactation number, daisy milk, production level, etc.?
Yeah, we've tried different things. What we feel most comfortable with now, and where it seems to work easiest, is to have a broad section of days and milk in any given pen. So if a dry cow is coming out, then we get to fill her spot with a fresh cow coming in. We do at times of the year do a high ration, low ration kind of feeding in the barn with a PMR. We don't like doing it because it takes a lot of labor to move the cows from pen to pen and to get them adjusted to left hand, right hand robots and so forth. My druthers are, and what we're currently doing is just one ration the whole way around the barn.
Yeah, that's more typical these days, yeah. Jim?
Do you want to talk about your milking permission and maybe even feed settings? How they're set up on the computer? So when do you adjust them? Do they differ between first and second lactation? Just about your milking permission, I'm assuming, and also feeding schedules.
Yeah. Milking permission is the same all across the herd, no matter of maturity of the herd. We have it set for most cows being eligible at 4 hours. On occasion, on a particular cow, we may increase that if she wants to frequent the milking station too often. There was a point where I was breeding with Jerseys, and crossbred Jerseys with Holsteins, they just love going to that milking station, and we had to begin limiting them at that point. But we are not doing any crossbreeding now. It's all purebred Holstein breeding. So we have cows that will, and we like to see them go up to 4x milking at the peak of their milk, and then across the pen, that'll go down to as low as about 1.5 at the end of lactation. Feeding is set up so that the fresh cow will come in and start at about 8 to 10 pounds of feed, and then the feed table allows it to increase as their milk production increases.
Okay. Probably can do one more question before I stop recording here, Doyle, but this is a quick question. Do you milk your cows 3x in the parlor before they go to the robot, and then they're milked 4 times in their lactation?
Yeah, we do 3x at the parlor. And then whenever that cow goes up to the robotic barn, many of them by about the second week will increase to 4x. And here's another tidbit that may be of interest to your audience. We find that older cows, not that we're training many of those anymore, but when we were training for this large barn, we found that our mature cows will train faster and easier than our L1s. And that was most intriguing to us, that they would go that way. Because in a parlor, it's much the opposite, where L1s train easier.
Interesting. So I'm going to move to the next slide here where we want to thank everyone for attending this episode of Robotic Milking Edition. Special thanks to you, Doyle, for joining us today. And invite everybody to come back. But also, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind staying for a few minutes after I stop recording, because we have a few more questions still to be answered. If you have a few more minutes, we would appreciate. Sure. So thank you very much.
Glad to.